You know how getting the vision that God's given you accomplished is such an incredibly difficult task. Listen, the most effective solution is actually mobilizing others to join you in the work. That's going to require helping them to develop a sense of hunger and ownership in the vision and mission that God's calling you together to meet. In today's conversation, I'm sitting again with Dan Slagle, an incredible leader, experienced, knowledgeable. We're going to talk about what it looks like to have and to build and to keep hungry teams and leaders together. Dan, I love getting a chance to sit and talk with you, brother. You've got just some incredible wisdom and insight. I know you've been leading in Christian context for more than 20 years. And so I'm sure that you've run across this in your leadership. My question, I've often heard, and Patrick Lencioni says it, right, that the ideal team player is hungry, humble, and smart. And I love that framing. I think it's pretty accurate. I think it's pretty helpful. And when I think about even the intentional, Christian context for leadership, I think, okay, Lord, you gave the apostles and by them, through them and now even to us, this concept of ownership of vision,
Mm-hmm.
right, and participation in vision, and I would say that concept of ownership and that concept of being hungry, right, in your ideal team player. Those are kind of married. Those kind of come together in my head. Man, how do we, in a leadership context where we're seeing that there's maybe a lack of that hunger, or there's a lack of that perceived ownership? What are some of the ways that we can address that? What are some of the ways that we can walk alongside those individuals
Mm-hmm.
to help introduce them to the blessings that come from taking on a responsibility, and then the blessing that comes from watching that responsibility met,
Mm-hmm.
right? How do we help people engage in some of that? I know that's a big question. Maybe you can help us break it down some here.
So I'll take it from the macro to the micro.
Okay.
On the larger scale, I think one absolute prerequisite is a culture of trust.
Mm.
The team needs to be able to believe that the leader is not simply going to be someone that tells the truth,
Mm-hmm.
but does what he says he's going to do, follows through.
Yeah.
Not false promises, but creates an atmosphere where nobody feels surprised, disappointed, hijacked. Those kind of things are going to happen from time to time. We're sinful, broken creatures.
Sure.
But by and large, the atmosphere of the team working together is, I trust you. You're a man or woman of your word, and I feel confident moving forward and even taking responsibility because I trust you.
I think that's so, I want to pause here for just a second, because, man, that when I think about creating a context where people feel the opportunity to have ownership, I don't think I would have necessarily thought of trust, but I think you're right. If you don't have trust, then you don't have the confidence of what the response will look like when failure comes, right? Because failure is inevitable in the process of taking risk, in the process of ownership. You're going to take risk, and you've got to have that trust as to what is the response going to be. And it doesn't mean the response is going to be, all sunshine and rainbows and positivity, but you want to have enough trust that, hey, when inevitably something fails, I'm going to be able to have an open, honest conversation, and I know that I'm going to be heard in that process, and I'm going to be felt in that process. And I also love, you pointed out that trust isn't just not telling lies. It's that when I make a statement that could be made false in the future, right? So when I promise a thing, that the future could make that promise then false because I haven't done the thing I said I was going to do. That's another element to that trust. Thank you for setting that foundation. Sorry for interrupting you. I just think that's so good.
I learned this the hard way. Early in my ministry, I worked for a man who did anything and everything but establish a culture of trust. And the the most egregious thing that he did was he would come up with an idea,
Okay.
which typically was a good idea, and at a staff meeting introduce it, and people get excited about it, and people are thinking, oh yeah, I'd love to help make this a reality. And then he would almost run with it single-handed. Increasingly, the staff began to feel like spectators instead of players in the game. And I remember after I had been working for this individual for about a year, thinking to myself, why am I even here?
Yeah.
You get me all fired up and excited about this, and I'm thinking about, oh yeah, I could contribute this and I could participate in this way. But at the end of the day, no, shoved off to the side. That's one of the reasons I say that atmosphere is so important.
Yeah.
Because if there's a lack of trust, people are going to drift away.
Yeah.
And whether you want to or not, you're going to be doing things solo. So that would be my starting point. Secondly, when you hire staff, you want to hire grown-ups.
Okay.
Here's what I mean.
Yeah.
Children should not take responsibility. That's part of being a child.
Sure. Okay.
Mom and dad are responsible.
There you go.
I remember once when my youngest daughter was about 8 or 9 years old, she came to me and she said, Dad, I'm really worried. And I said, well, what's wrong, baby?
Yeah.
And she said, I'm worried about taxes. I said, taxes? What do you, how am I going to pay my taxes? She had seen an HR Block commercial or something.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I said, baby, that's not anything you have to worry about right now.
Right.
That's mom and dad's job. We'll take care of the taxes.
There you go.
There'll come a day when, you'll have to think about that. But for now, that's on us. That's a child.
Yeah.
Who should not take responsibility. Grown-ups take responsibility. Mature adults.
Yeah.
And so in the hiring of staff, one of the things you want to be looking for are the indicators of personal maturity.
There you go.
Is there evidence that you have taken responsibility in the past?
That's right.
Are you an emotionally healthy person?
Yeah.
Or are you one who's inclined to delegate up
Yeah.
instead of taking responsibility, making the life of the leader more miserable? Or a pass the buck kind of person, the victim, all this kind of thing. I realize that there's no surefire means of being absolutely certain every staff member you have.
Of course.
But to the degree that you are able, which will involve, prayer and thoughtful questioning of the individual and looking into their past and looking at references and
Sure.
and even using tools that are available. When I was at FaithBridge, one of the tools we used before hiring staff was this thing called Insights, which helped us identify how a person approached leadership.
Okay.
Broke it down into 4 very familiar quadrants. The reds were the type A's, take charge. The blues were your hyper-organized, every file in its place. Yellow's the life of the party. A green was your more thoughtful, pull back, consider all the options. Gaining that kind of understanding about the individual and getting all the information you can beforehand can save you a lot of trouble. Once you have your team assembled, have enough courage to give them responsibility.
Yeah.
They may blow it.
That's right.
From time to time, they probably will.
Yeah.
But A leader doesn't do the work of 10 people. A leader gets 10 people to do the work of 10 people.
Yeah.
And there is nothing more motivating to a staff person or a member of an organization than to be given an opportunity fully.
Yeah.
Understanding that, okay, I've got to deliver here.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're a grown-up, that's what they're going to be thinking.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I got to get after it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do the best I can to make sure that this thing is delivered on time and all the bells and whistles and so forth. Obviously, you're not going to, put a dump truck load of responsibility on someone, who's just starting out. You want to make your responsibilities that you're giving away commensurate with the abilities of the individual.
Right.
That's how you grow people.
That's right.
Okay, you did good at this. Here's more responsibility.
Right.
And increasing that. I think if those three things at least are in place, an atmosphere of trust,
mm-hmm.
a mature staff, emotionally, spiritually, and genuine responsibilities being handed out with expectation.
Yeah.
I think you're going to create a working environment where people are motivated to jump in because they're going to have a sense that I really am making a contribution here. Yeah. It mattered.
I was talking to another leader a couple weeks back, David Daniels. He's on our board.
Mm-hmm.
He leads he's got probably 300-400, maybe 500 staff under his ultimate influence as a leader. And he was reminding me, he said, hey, look, everybody's looking for belonging and an opportunity to make a contribution. Right. And providing a context where you have those things is a context where people are going to begin to thrive and people are going to begin to, come into their own. And I think as Christian leaders, we have to recognize that's part of God's design, right? He designed us for a purpose. I'm with a lot of marketplace leaders, and one of the things I've heard them say is, hey, work was in the garden before the fall, right? So work is an expression of worship, and when we see, it wasn't, in the garden, it wasn't, just this leisure land, but there was something good there. And so when we help people engage in work, we're helping them live out a purpose and a calling, and those are good things. Those are positive things. And I'm reflecting as I'm listening. I'm going, okay, so I've got to have that context of trust. That's so important. I want to make sure that we're giving those sincere opportunities for responsibility. It reminds me, when we talk about visionary leadership and setting goals, we talk about the art of delegation. At ILI, as we walk through that particular core value, we note that in the art of delegation, you're going to cast that vision, and then you're going to help there to be a clear, set of goal, right? A clear goal in that process, measurable, actionable, realistic, attainable, time targeted. And then in the process, you let them run, and when they need support, you come back, right? And you come back and serve in that way to help, because there might be resources or assets that as the leader in the organization you have access to, you can unleash. I've heard another well-known Christian author. He said, "Look, as the leader, your job is to break down all the barriers. If there's an obstacle in the way, you have authority to remove that obstacle. And if you shouldn't remove it, you'll know why and what the consequence is to it." So, but all of that is still presuming that there's that person who's longing for that, who's engaging in that. We all have story, we all have history, and I can't say the global reality of this, but certainly in a post-Christian context that you and I live in, right, in the West, in the United States in particular, there can be this tendency culturally toward really the ease of identification as victim, right? To see ourselves as constantly the recipient of the consequences around us,
Mm-hmm.
not a participant in the creation of our context.
Right.
Okay. And so all of that has led to context where I think sometimes with leaders here, particularly in the United States, maybe, I look forward to chatting with some of our other brothers and sisters abroad to see if this is their reality. You got people who have woundedness, who fear responsibility, who fear some of those things. In your mind, is that a trigger for us to say, hey, maybe they're not, maybe they don't have that maturity yet. Maybe they lack some of that emotionally healthy position. Is that where you see those things kind of taking place? And how do you meet people in that moment? What are some strategies to help crafting a context where healing ultimately takes place, and that re-engagement in
Right.
responsibility and ownership can begin to take hold?
Well, generally speaking,
Sure, yeah.
understanding there are
Generalities.
always exceptions. Those are the kinds of people that you minister to, but you don't necessarily hire.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
They're certainly worthy of your time.
Oh, yeah.
and your pastoral efforts to help them find the healing, whatever the brokenness or the woundedness may be. And it may be that in that process of healing, as a leader, you see, oh, wow, there's incredible untapped potential here.
Yeah.
But to put them in a position of responsibility when they have not dealt with those issues is not going to be good for anybody. For the leader, they're not going to get done what they need done.
Yeah.
And for the individual, it's only going to reinforce their sense of worthlessness and failure, and all these.
Yeah.
You don't want to set people up for failure.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. People rise to the occasion based on their maturity level. Here, I'm coming back to that maturity
that phrase, that
concept again.
Mm.
If you are in a position where you're hiring people, you have the advantage of discerning,
Sure,
making a decision.
Yeah.
Sometimes, though, a leader is thrust into a position where the team is already in place.
Sure.
And then part of the job of the leader is helping people either grow beyond their immaturity or inviting them to step off the bus.
There you go.
Which is never fun to do.
No.
But we have to think about the whole,
Yeah.
It's not the many for the one, it's the one for the many.
That's right. Yeah.
Now, obviously, that requires maturity on the part of the leader. Speed of the leader, speed of the team.
That's right. Yeah.
And if an unhealthy person is at the helm, they're going to attract unhealthy. We attract who we are. You put two emotionally unhealthy, codependent people in a room of 1,000 healthy people, they're going to find each other every time because they're going to be put off by the health. They're going to be threatened by the health, and they're going to be looking for, oh, there you are. You're just as messed up as I am. I don't have to feel bad about myself. Same sort of dynamic happens in hiring and in gathering a team. If you're not an emotionally healthy person, you chances are pretty good you're not going to gather those kinds of individuals around you. In the case where you inherit an unhealthy person, I would say from a Christian perspective, our first response should be one of compassion.
Of course, yeah.
And how can we move beyond this?
Yeah.
How can we address it, deal with it? And if we're able to, wonderful. But in the unfortunate instance where we just can't get past it, then we have to make the hard decision to perhaps make a change.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about what it looks like to create a context where healthy ownership can thrive. We've talked a little bit about what to do when, gosh, we just can't get people to that place. I'd be curious. I think there are sometimes the opposite problem where people take ownership of everything,
Right.
right? Due to their own maybe insecurities and their desire for praise, right? Which again is another form of unhealth. I heard one leader, he was talking, he said, he always knew that he could get, if he hired people who had just a little bit of insecurity and were a people pleaser, he could always get the tasks accomplished, right? Because you hire that kind of person, you can always get the tasks accomplished.
Right.
But he was confronted by, wait a second, that doesn't sound like a very Christ honoring structure. That kind of feels like using people.
Yes.
That kind of sounds like the objective isn't the individual and their growth, their health, their discovering of purpose, or all these other things. It's just, hey, you're a robot in the process just to achieve my aims.
That's
and we
corporate
know,
America.
dude, I'm telling you. But we know that's not the way of Christ. We know that's not the way of the body of Christ. Whether we're in the marketplace or not. So here's a question. What if you have an individual who has a hyper sense of ownership? Okay. And here's what I mean. They take ownership of things outside of the scope of where they actually have ownership, right? They begin to say, wait a second, I have to protect, or I have to, I have to practice a measure of influence over here, right? Leadership influence over here, even though that is outside of the defined purview or defined influence that I have been delegated or given. How do you what do you do with that? Because my natural thought is, well, man, you've got somebody who's trying to take ownership. That's a good thing. You don't want to squash that. How do you help to disciple that, to develop that, to work that into a healthier place?
I heard a very seasoned leader say one time that the job of a leader is to define reality.
Mm.
And that is a task that happens on the macro scale for the whole organization, but also for the individuals. Mm. This is your reality. These are my expectations. And part of defining reality is creating healthy boundaries. Mm. So that people understand that this is in my purview, this is a part of my responsibility, this is not. Mm. Do I have the capacity to take on more? Perhaps you do.
Maybe.
Great.
Okay.
Let's talk about what that might look like. But at the end of the day, if the leader decides, nope, your greatest contribution is to focus on this, mm-hmm. that needs to be made clear to the person, because you got to think about the whole team.
Yeah.
You don't want someone feeling like, hey, that's my area. Stay in your lane.
Yeah.
And if a leader is absentee mm-hmm. or strictly focused on productivity, you're going to wind up with a group of people who do feel used mm-hmm. and who do not feel as though they are making a contribution. They're not growing and probably going to be leaving sooner rather than later. Yeah. So a leader needs to have the wisdom and the courage to define reality for the organization and for each individual. And when some monitoring is necessary, be willing to step in there and do that for the good of the whole.
Yeah, man, that's such a good reminder. It can be, I'm thinking there are contexts where sometimes that desire for ownership is an expression of, I don't like what I currently have ownership of.
Yes.
Right. Sometimes it's, I care a lot and I'm deeply passionate and I have greater capacity than my current capacity mm-hmm. or my current, responsibility set. And so there's an opportunity there to say, okay, well, maybe you do, maybe you don't. Like, okay, you have greater capacity, but you're lacking the maturity or you're lacking the whatever. Okay, that's a developmental issue. Let's just, let's pathway that out. Let's look at what that's going to be like into the future. And that's wonderful. Dan, here's maybe kind of a closing thought or idea. There was a famous leader, maybe he was a U.S. president. I can't exactly recall who said it. Point is, it's not my saying. Success has many fathers. Failure is an orphan.
Yes.
When we look at helping people to develop a healthy hunger, when we look at helping people develop a healthy concept of ownership and responsibility, nobody wants to be given the garbage bag. Nobody wants the situation that's already totally messed up, totally garbage. It's a different thing to take on that and then be given that and go, wait a second, I don't want ownership of this. This is a project car, not a car that I can drive every day. Dan, how do you sometimes, hey, you still gotta, that project car still got to work. How do you help to identify the spiritual or the emotional maturity necessary for those kinds of projects? Right. Sometimes in an organization that you lead, you've got, hey, this thing still has to exist, and it's just not pretty right now.
Right.
Right. And I'm going to be giving you a thing, and you're going to have ownership of a thing, and it's not going to be something you're going to be proud of for a little while. How do you help to inspire that, encourage that, or just identify who can take that?
Right.
Right. Because as a leader, sometimes you go, yeah, my marketing arm is just weak.
Yeah.
And it's not strong right now. I got to find somebody. Yep. Or my children's discipleship, in my church, it's not a pretty thing, but I need somebody who's going to come in and take ownership, and they're willing to begin that ownership in a position where it's kind of ugly. How do you discern or navigate that process?
Well, I think it's incumbent upon the leader of the organization to be always teaching the team, whether that be explicit, proactive sort of teaching or teaching by example.
Yeah.
And one of the many lessons that needs to be taught is we're not always going to get to do what we want to do.
Fair enough.
And we're doing ministry, and ministry involves brokenness, whether that is broken people or broken systems. And it's going to be the responsibility of everybody at one time or another to have to jump into the mess and take care of it. And just helping people understand before it comes their time, this is part of the deal, you know. I remember when we had our first child, there was a time when she not only, of course, needed her diaper changed, but she had an upset tummy, and, that means crying, and, the whole... And I remember thinking to myself, gosh, I didn't sign up for this. Well, yes, I did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, I did. That just comes with the territory,
That's
you
right,
know.
Yeah.
And helping people understand ahead of time, this is ministry.
Yeah.
There's fun parts and there's unfun parts.
Mm-hmm.
You need to understand that. Be an observant leader.
Okay.
And notice who is capable of rising to the occasion, and who, for whatever reason, either isn't in a position to do so right now. They've already got more than they can say grace over as it is, or who hasn't developed enough to take on this big, hairy mess. Maybe the small mess that comes along, I'm going to give to them. And see who rises to the occasion. See who's capable. When you begin to observe that one individual isn't capable, find out why. Is this a fear factor?
Yeah.
Is this a skill factor?
Yeah.
You just haven't gained that skill yet. And as a leader, I'm going to show you how. This is how you do this. Or is it an immaturity factor? Any number of reasons can inhibit an individual from performing a task, pleasant or unpleasant as it may be. Paying attention to who can do it, and always being available. The only thing worse than having to take on a mess is having to take on a mess alone.
Yeah.
And having the sense that, sink or swim.
Yeah.
And check in with me when you have swum. you know, if you've sunk, don't buy. Followers want to know. Okay, if I take this on, you got my back. You're going to be. I'm not going to delegate up. I'm not going to slough this off on you or anybody else. I'm going to take it. I'm going to take it seriously. But I just need to know when I need guidance, when I need help, encouragement, whatever the case may be. You're there to give that to me.
Yeah.
And when the mess has been fixed, you noticed.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
It wasn't just, okay, next thing.
No,
the leader takes time to say, thanks.
Yeah.
Before I went into ministry, I worked in electrical controls for a steel fabricating company.
That's incredible.
And I remember once we had a huge job up in Kutztown, Pennsylvania, a little town outside of Philadelphia. It was the installation of a system needed in an auto battery manufacturing company.
Okay.
And it had to be done yesterday. And so our team was sent with the mission to you just go.
Yeah.
And I remember we would be up at 4 a.m., breakfast, and on the job site by 4:45, and would work until 8, 9. There were nights I came back to the hotel. I didn't even bother to undress, kick off my boots. I just laid down on the bed and I grabbed whatever sleep I could. And the next day we're at it.
Doing it again.
And this was like 2 weeks of this. But we got it done.
Yeah.
And so we load up the trucks and we drive back to Austell, where the business was. And it just so happened that the company owner, the president of the company, was there when we arrived.
Wow.
And he was aware of what we had been up against and what we had accomplished. We got out, and basically all he wanted to know was the owner happy? And then he turned around and walked off. He didn't say anything remotely like, thanks, guys. I know that, man, you gave the extra effort. Just, well, you're getting a paycheck. That ought to be good enough.
Yeah. Paycheck isn't praise.
I almost wanted to quit right there. I thought, wow, I gave my all for you, and all I get is a paycheck and letting you know whether or not the customer was happy. No, I didn't need a parade.
Right.
But just some acknowledgement. People will be more inclined, I think, to take on messes in the future if they know you've got their back.
Yeah.
And when they've done a good job, it's acknowledged. Good job.
Man, there's so much wisdom there because, if they're willing to take on the mess, right? That's the worst case scenario, right? And to miss that opportunity to praise, to encourage, to acknowledge, to express appreciation can be a real danger. And we want to be people who are quick to do that, right? Gratitude,
Amen.
I think, is a core characteristic of the Christian life because we, of all people, have every reason to be grateful for so many things. Well, Dan, this is so helpful as I think through what does it look like to create a culture of ownership, a culture that is hungry, as it were. Man, got to have that foundation of trust. Got to make sure that's there. Got to be helping to create a context where not only are spiritually and emotionally mature leaders developed, but welcomed, right, and held. I've got to be looking for those opportunities to acknowledge and praise when ownership has occurred and that transformation's taken place. I mean, that's a critical moment in that life cycle, so that individuals see that. Because you know what? I bet you there were people in the organization who saw that crew come back, knew what they'd been going through, and they didn't take ownership of that problem. You guys were the crew that came back home, right? But they're looking going, well, gosh, they just went and did all that. I got no desire to take ownership of anything,
Exactly.
because even when somebody does, look at this, like, and I that note, I do think that there are some leaders who think that the opportunity is appreciation enough, and
Yeah.
I just don't think that's true.
No.
It's not the opportunity that expresses appreciation. It's the expression of appreciation
Absolutely.
after the fact, and to note how that has to be received. Right. Some people need appreciation in different ways, and so to take that extra time and to remember, it's not that as the leader we're to do 10 jobs. We're to get 10 people to do 10 jobs, and that's so critical. Dan, as always, I'm just so thankful for your insight, for your wisdom, brother. This is something I'm learning and growing in as well as a leader. And so I'm thankful to be able to navigate that conversation with you. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Leaders, listen. You have a God-given vision and mission. And part of that is going to be connected into expanding the kingdom of God to reach the nations. Look, the global need for the good news and the hope of Jesus is bigger than you or me individually, but it's not bigger than the whole body of Christ. That's why the whole body is called into that good work. At the International Leadership Institute, we equip leaders so that you can advance the kingdom and mobilize the whole body to accelerate the spread of the gospel. If you want to find resources, be connected in more to our community, I want to encourage you, go to iliteam.org. There you're going to find some good resources, some connections, and help be a part of all that God's doing, not just here, but around the world. And listen, if this is helpful for you, I want to encourage you, like, subscribe, do the different things so that we can know and engage and help bring you the most important and valuable content and questions to help you grow in your life and leadership. Thanks so much for joining us today.